Crap, how do you explain this? Bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue sur Blabla Katie. My name is Katie and today we're going to blabla about when to link French words. If you saw my most recent video called Why is Everything in French Silent? Then you know that there are a ton of rules that have to do with when not to pronounce letters in French. But there's more to add to that because in French there's also something called a liaison, and this has to do with when consonants that are normally silent are actually pronounced. So if you haven't seen that video on silent letters in French, I definitely recommend watching that one first, and then this video will make a lot more sense. There are 3 different groups of liaison in French, so in this video we're going to focus just on the required liaison, but make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss my future videos on optional liaison and forbidden liaison. As usual, before we get into any explanations, you're going to do a pre-assessment so you can just see where you're at with understanding when you should be linking French words. So you should be seeing 3 sentences on the screen. I'll give you a little bit of time to try to pronounce them out loud. We will be doing the same activity at the end of the video, and I will later on give you the correct pronunciation. Alright, first things first, what is a liaison? A liaison is when you take a consonant that is normally silent and then you actually pronounce it. You're going to pronounce these normally silent consonants when they are the last letter in a word and the next word starts with a vowel. So really it's just meant to allow these 2 words to connect. For example, if you take the words vous and avez, you know from having watched my video on why everything in French is silent, that the S at the end of vous is silent, but when you put the 2 together, you say vous avez. So the liaison is just the link between these 2 words. And the way that you want to think of a liaison, instead of just simply pronouncing the last consonant, you want to think of that consonant starting the next word that really actually starts with a vowel. So again, with the example vous avez, you don't want to think of it as vous and avez. Instead, you want to think of it as vous avez. You'll also notice with this example that the S is not pronounced S, it's actually pronounced Z. So it's important to know that when you have an S that is being used for a liaison, it's going to have the Z sound. A couple of other letters change as well. F becomes V. If you have the word neuf and heure, you say neuf. Des takes on the T sound. So if you have the words grand and you would say grand homme. And the X is also going to take on the sound for Z. For example, six étudiants. For all of the other consonants in the alphabet, if they are being used in a liaison, they're just going to use their normal sound. But I should also note that the 2 nasals, M and N, are going to be somewhat denasalized, so you will actually hear their sounds as well. If you're still a little shaky on nasal sounds, I also made a video on that. I'll put the link in the description box below if you want to check that out as well. So now that you know the different sounds for the liaison, we can actually move on to when these liaisons are required in French. For the first category, you are going to pronounce a normally silent consonant and link the words after what's called a determiner. For example, after an article like les becomes les when you have a word that starts with a vowel directly after. Les enfants. The same goes after a number. For example, trois élèves after an adjective, petit ami, and also after possessives. For example, son notre ami. Before moving on to the next category, I do want to give you 1 sentence to try to read out loud, focusing just on the liaison after a determiner. And I will give you the correct pronunciation in a few seconds. And the pronunciation is Mon ancienne copine a 2 animaux. You're going to see a liaison between mon and ancienne because you have the possessive mon followed by an adjective that starts with a vowel. Mon ancienne. And you're also going to have a liaison between deux and animaux. 2 animaux. Again, the X takes on the Z sound because we have a number, deux, followed by a noun that starts with a vowel. For the next category of required liaison, we have pronouns followed by a verb. For example, ils and on. Ils ont, the S becomes the Z sound. And the same will work if you invert the 2. If you're asking ont-ils, you're going to hear the T. And in the same category, pronouns will use the liaison when they are followed by another pronoun. Nous en voulons. We have nous, which is a subject pronoun, and en, which is a different type of pronoun. If you're a little rusty on all the different types of pronouns in French, I will be making a future video on this. But for now, we know that nous and en are both types of pronouns. Nous en. Here's another practice sentence for you. Make sure you're paying attention to the liaison for both categories that we have gone over so far. Vous avez un bel appartement. Here there's a liaison between vous and avez, vous avez, because we have a subject pronoun vous followed by a verb that starts with a vowel. For the third category, you are going to link French words. When you have a single syllable adverb followed by another word that starts with a vowel, for example, the adverb très, if you were to say très and étrange, you would say très étrange. I also want to point out another adverb that to Anglophones might not be so obvious, but the adverb bien is also going to be part of this rule. So you might think that bien isn't one syllable, but that's how you kind of want to think about it. So for example, if you want to say bien and aimable, aimable starts with a vowel. So you want to think about using the N at the end of bien as the beginning of aimable. So now we have n'aimable. And then you want to think about the bien part as just one syllable. I know that that might not sound like one syllable to you, but it is part of this rule. The same goes for single syllable prepositions, though I will say there are some exceptions here, and I will talk about these in the second part of this video, which will come out next week. If you have the preposition chez, you would say chez elle. Same thing with the preposition dans une minute. And finally, for this same category, you will have the same rule for single syllable conjunctions, like the conjunction quand-il. And again, you should hear the day takes on the t sound. So for your next practice sentence, once again, you're going to try to pronounce this out loud and try to put together all of the different reasonings for the liaison that we've already talked about. La photo des éléphants est très intéressante. Here you're going to have a liaison between des and éléphants because you have a determiner, des, which is an article, and then you have éléphant after, which starts with a vowel, des éléphants. And you're going to have a liaison with très intéressante. And this is because you have a single syllable adverb, très, followed by a word that starts with a vowel. And the last category are really just fixed expressions where you are going to use the liaison. For example, if you're using quand as part of a question and it's followed by est-ce que, you're going to say quand est-ce que. The same goes for avant-hier, c'est-à-dire, comment allez-vous, plus ou moins, États-Unis, peut-être, and de temps en temps. Of course, there are other fixed expressions. This list is not exhaustive, but these are some pretty common phrases that it'll be good for you to memorize so that you know how to correctly pronounce them. So before we move on to the final assessment, you have one more practice sentence. Try to keep in mind everything we've gone over for the rules on when to link words in French. Quand est-ce que nous avons regardé le film? Avant-hier peut-être. Here there are a ton of liaisons. We have the fixed expressions quand est-ce que, avant-hier, and peut-être, as well as a liaison between nous and avons, nous avons. Because of the rule from the second category, you have a pronoun nous followed by a verb. So if you feel comfortable with these different categories for the required liaison in French, we can move on to the final assessment. Once again, you're going to be looking at these three sentences and try to pronounce them out loud. After a few seconds, I will give you the correct pronunciation. For the first sentence, nous avons trouvé deux enfants. Nous avons has the liaison because nous is a subject pronoun followed by a word that starts with a vowel. And you'll also have a liaison with deux enfants because deux is a determiner. It is a number followed by a word that starts with a vowel. For the second sentence, la table très utile est dans une salle devant une fenêtre. You're going to have a liaison between très and utile, très utile, because you have the single syllable adverb très followed by a word that starts with a vowel. Dans une, there's also another liaison because you have a single syllable preposition. Faites attention, the next preposition in the sentence, devant, this ends with a consonant that is normally silent and is followed by another word, une, that starts with a vowel, but you are not going to hear the t. This letter is going to remain silent because this preposition is not single syllable. Devant une fenêtre. And finally, quand est-ce que vous allez aux États-Unis? So again, we have some fixed expressions, quand est-ce que and États-Unis. You'll also see that there's a liaison between au and États-Unis because au is a determiner. It's an article that ends with an x. And finally, there's a liaison between vous and allez. Vous allez, because we have a subject pronoun, vous, followed by a verb. Voilà. So that is all for the required liaison for today. If you have any questions, as usual, please put them in the comments down below. And if at any point you got value out of this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. You know the drill by now. À la prochaine.